secretary, or was he CIA chief at the time? I don't remember. He said to the American...
Still CIA chief.
Still CIA chief. He said to President Obama, as you describe it, he put the American people argument to President Obama. Describe that tension between those who wanted and those who didn't.
I think so for Vice President Biden, I think the issue was, is the intelligence good enough to take this risk with our troops? And that was his fundamental question. For General Cartwright, he thought that there was a better way. He thought that we should take essentially a drone strike against an individual who was pacing around the compound regularly, who we thought to be Osama Bin Laden. So General Cartwright wanted to conduct an operation just a different run. The Vice President wanted to wait for more intelligence. The argument that Leon Panetta made very powerfully was if the American people know what we know, and I remember to this day him saying this, if the American people know what we know, they would want us to act, they would expect us to act. And I think that was a powerful argument around the table.
Let me move on to the Arab Spring, because all of this is all part of a big part. People hope that when Osama bin Laden was caught, and the whole idea of democracy coming to the Arab world would actually have a much better effect than it's had. And the CIA, I mean, you say that part of the reason you got all that so wrong was that you were relying on the strongmen themselves for intelligence. You say, we failed because we were, to a large extent, relying on a handful of strong leaders in the countries of concern to help us understand what was going on in the Arab street. But isn't that a basic mistake? Because on the one hand, these leaders are not in touch with their people. That's why there was a revolution. And yet you went to these very leaders to figure out, what their people knew.
Sure, Christiane, there were two key analytic judgments. The first was, we had been warning for years that pressures were building in the Middle East, social pressures, economic pressures, political pressures for change. And we've been warning about that. What we weren't able to do is tell the president, Mr. President, these pressures we've been talking about, they're building to the point of boiling over. We didn't do that. We weren't able to call the tipping point. The other judgment, and I think we should have been, right? And I think we should have been, and I think you're right. The other judgment we made was in the immediate beginning of the Arab Spring, we said, we think this is going to undercut al-Qaeda. We think this is going to undercut their narrative that it takes violence to bring political change. And that turned out to be wrong. In fact, I have a chapter called Al-Qaeda Spring, right? The Arab Spring was really a spring for al-Qaeda. And it was a spring for al-Qaeda in two ways. It really benefited them on the one hand because it destroyed institutions that were capable of keeping a handle on them. Best example, Libya, where the intelligence service and the security service fell apart and militants were able to run wild. And the other thing it did was undercut the willingness of some Arab countries to take on extremism. Best example, President Morsi's Egypt, where the capabilities were there, but the officers